We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Exelberth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. It was a gut check to see if Ukraine will defend itself. That was Vladimir Fresenko, head of the Penta Political Research Institute in Kiev, after the central government reported destroying a column of military vehicles crossing the border from Russia. Moscow denied such a mission, while a larger Russian convoy waited near its side of the border for Red Cross inspection to confirm it carried only humanitarian aid to embattled separatists around Donetsk and Luhansk. Now this.
We helped vulnerable people reach safety, and we helped save many innocent lives.
وأعلن أمامكم اليوم ولتسهيل سير العملية السياسية وتشكيل الحكومة الجديدة سحب ترشيحي لصالح الأخ الدكتور حيدر العبادي.
America's military return to Iraq escalated last week as humanitarian aid and protection for Yazidi minority refugees on a mountaintop near Erbil morphed into attacks on a key dam held by Islamic State extremists near Mosul. And Iraq's paralyzing political logjam finally broke as Shiite Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki accepted growing pressure to resign so new leaders can try to end the isolation of Sunnis that has helped fuel the spread of those Islamic State forces from across the border with Syria.
The situation continued to raise fears of U.S. mission creep on one hand and of a new home base for terrorism on the other, threatening those considered unbelievers in Iraq, across the region, and perhaps as far as America itself. To consider those and related issues for your ears only, we're joined again by Larry Diamond, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and Director of the Stanford University Center for Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. A former coalition advisor in Baghdad after President Bush's shock and awe assault, he's also the author of Squandered Victory, the American occupation and the bungled effort to bring democracy to Iraq, and later The Spirit of Democracy, the struggle to build free societies throughout the world. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, David.
Were you surprised that U.S. Special Operations personnel so quickly declared the refugee crisis on that mountaintop ended? Maybe a little convenient. Some international observers say thousands of Yazidi are still threatened there and elsewhere.
Well, everything is relative. The initial reports that it was 20,000 or more. Now it seems to be in the low thousands. I don't think we can declare the crisis over, and we've got to find a way to get them off that mountain.
Do you see U.S. military efforts to recapture the Mosul Dam as mistaken mission creep or a more limited effort to protect the Kurdish area that seems the most stable in all Iraq?
Well, Melissa, I don't mind mission creep because I think that we need it. I think we should have done more sooner. I think there's an existential crisis facing Iraq now. This terrorist army, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, is running amok over Iraq and Syria, and it's got the potential to destroy Iraq. And with it, the most successful achievement that the U.S. has had in Iraq, which is the support for a really fairly democratic and pluralistic regional government in Kurdistan. So I think we absolutely need to do more to help this country defend itself.
On the political front, what chances do you give Iraq's new prime minister from al-Maliki's own Shiite party to develop Sunni support? What concrete steps would you suggest?
Well, I think the concrete steps are obvious, and they are the ones that we took after the last military surge in 2007-2008, which would not have succeeded without a political surge, which involved outreach to the Sunni tribes in the region. And he needs to do that again, and he needs to bring in Sunni Arab politicians into his government and make clear that he's going to seek a very pluralistic approach and not victimize his opponents in a vengeful fashion, which is the way Nouri al-Maliki increasingly governed over his turbulent time in office. Iraq is actually one of the largest oil producers in the world. They don't seem to be short of money. And the Iraqi government could redirect some resources to these Sunni tribal councils and to people who are willing to come on board if they have the political will to do so.
Could they take control back from forces of the Islamic State now?
Well, I think eventually they could. It's going to be a very long struggle because this is a formidably determined and surprisingly capable enemy. I think that the United States needs to be prepared to use air power to restrain the movement of ISIS and aid Iraqi military campaigns to roll it back, probably for some time to come. It seems to have had some impact. It really might have saved Kurdistan.
After seeing video of those Islamic State forces using U.S. equipment abandoned by Iraqi government units, do you think it's wise to provide more such equipment there and to the moderate rebels in Syria who seem frequently overwhelmed both by the Islamic State extremists and Assad regime loyalists?
It's a tough affair, and I would even say agonizing question, but each instance has to be weighed on its own merits and prospects. In Syria, we weren't talking, about the provision of heavy weaponry or highly sophisticated weaponry, but, the basic ability of moderate elements to fight against the state. And in Syria, it's possible it may be too late. I think the president has waited far too long and has been far too cautious and frankly was disingenuous in his interview with Tom Friedman when he said, they're just a bunch of professors and doctors. How could they be a fighting force? A lot of resistance forces, started that way and developed capability over time. In the case of Kurdistan, I think we should give them everything that they want and might possibly need. They're a capable, disciplined state. They have a capable, disciplined army. I think they can make effective and secure use of these weapons.
How large a threat to America is establishment of the Islamic State in Iraq, or in major areas of it, as opposed to the spread of its ideology elsewhere in the region, to Europe and beyond? Is in the age of internet and global air travel, is geography really important?
I think your question just answered itself. It's less important than it used to be. And I think if you're going to rate threats to the national security of the United States, you would probably have to count ISIS now as a more serious and existential threat to our own territorial security than al-Qaeda, because al-Qaeda is not in control of any significant piece of territory. And ISIS is, and they have the momentum. They're so ruthless and violent that even al-Qaeda found them too extreme. And there's absolutely no doubt that if they're able to establish a secure foothold in this territory spanning Syria and Iraq, that eventually they will try and use that as a base to strike not only Europe, but the United States.
Larry Diamond is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and director of the Stanford University Center for Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. A former coalition advisor in Baghdad after President Bush's shock and awe, he's also the author of Squandered Victory, the American Occupation and the Bungled Effort to Bring Democracy to Iraq. And more recently, The Spirit of Democracy, the struggle to build free societies throughout the world.
Next, Robin Williams and the Tragedy of Comedy, for your ears only.